Here are some common questions for your auto deposition case. First, they're going to ask you where you lived the past 20 years. They'll ask you if you've been in the military. They're going to ask you your marital status. They'll ask you whether or not you've been whether or not you've been found guilty of any crimes. They're going to ask you for the date of the accident, the location of the accident. They will ask you whether or not the car that you were in, if it had any prior mechanical or physical damage before the accident, any bumps, any scrapes. They'll ask you what street you've been driving on and where you came from and the route that you took from where you left to the accident. They'll ask you where you were going and whether or not you were in a hurry to get there. They'll ask you who called the police. They'll ask you if the police or ambulance came first. They will ask you if you were unconscious and how long. And of course, if you're unconscious, nobody ever knows how long you're unconscious for. If you were unconscious, they'll ask you the first and the last thing that you remember before going unconscious and then when regaining your consciousness. They're going to ask you if you felt any injuries at the site of the accident and whether or not you went to the hospital. They're going to ask you what kind of tests were done at the hospital. For example, x-rays. Usually MRIs are never done at the hospital. Then they will ask you where you followed up, if anywhere, and when after you left the hospital. So next day or 2 days later. Then ask you what kind of doctor you followed up with and what your complaints are that day. They're going to ask you if the doctor then gave you a course of treatment, such as therapy or chiropractic, acupuncture, and how long you did those things for. A year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever that may be. And they're going to ask you why you stopped. They're going to ask you if you had surgery, if you went to an orthopedist, and when you went and why, and what kind of surgery it was. They'll ask you if you had MRIs and what these MRIs showed. And in the end, they're always going to ask you what your limitations are, meaning what you can do but you have a hard time doing, what you cannot do at all from the accident. In other words, how this accident has impacted your life. And they're going to ask you what still hurts you and how often it hurts, and whether or not there's anything that makes your injuries better or worse. How's that?